Hi, I'm Rebecca Merola, and I am a co-owner of Junction. Today we're going to talk about sourdough. It's all the rage with people staying at home and doing more baking in their own kitchens. So my favorite way to bake bread is using sourdough, a sourdough starter. So I have my own starter here, and I actually started this with nothing but flour and water, and several days monitored under very strict temperature guidelines. It produced its own bacteria and started to ferment. So that's basically how you get a sourdough starter. Okay, so in order to feed your sourdough, you also have to discard some of it. Now, I really don't like throwing stuff away. So if I don't have a friend who's wanting to get into sourdough that I can portion off my discard and give to them, then I'm looking for recipes on how to use that discarded sourdough starter so that I don't have to throw it away. And I found a really cool recipe they're sourdough crackers. And so that's what I'm going to show you how to make today. So the first thing that I'm going to do is, the recipe says I need about a cup or 200 grams of mature sourdough starter. I stopped, oh my gosh, 100. Oh, I was gonna say I stopped at 199, but it actually reads 202. And if you're off by a couple of grams, that's really not that big a deal. Okay, so I'm gonna set my sourdough starter aside for the moment, but I am gonna come back and feed that so that I can use it for a future project. I'm gonna cover it with a little piece of cheesecloth. Okay, so my recipe calls for 3 different kinds of flour. I'm gonna go ahead and set my spoon in the bowl, in the starter, so that when I turn the power button on again, it will start with a 0 weight, even though I have all this stuff on the scale, because now I only wanna measure the flour. And I like using this method because I only dirty up like 1 bowl and 1 spoon. So to me, that's important. Okay, so I need a half a cup or 60 grams of all-purpose flour. I'm using bread flour, which has a little bit higher protein. I'm just gonna shake in here until I get to, okay, that scoop was 46, so it's just 50, 55, 58. You know, that's close enough. I'm gonna stop at 58. Okay, the next flour that I need is a whole wheat flour, and we're looking for another 60 grams. Now the third flour we're gonna use is rye flour, and I only need 12 grams of this because it's a lot denser flour. Now we have our flours. I'll move those out of the way. The next thing to go in is the extra virgin olive oil. And again, I'm gonna just turn my scale off. This calls for 32 grams. 32 on the nose, perfect. I've got a little bit of oil on me. Okay, so the last things to go in are the herbs. These are dried herbs de Provence. It's made up of several different herbs that I actually grew in my garden and dried, so I'm excited about that. Again, I just Googled a recipe for what goes in herbs de Provence. And then we need a half teaspoon of fine sea salt. Teaspoon of that. Okay, so now I'm going to take this off of the scale. The scale has worked really hard during this recipe, but it's finished. So I'm just going to mix this up. You'll see it's kind of a stiff dough, stiff batter. Now once I get this mixed up, I will put it in a plastic bag, and we're going to refrigerate it for about at least an hour. You can refrigerate it up to 24 hours. It's a little easier to work with when it's real cold. So you'll notice when I'm mixing this up, there's some dark spots in the dough. That's that rye flour. It's just got a little bit darker characteristic. So now that I've got it to about this degree of mixed up, I'm gonna get in there with my hands. and just mix it up because I want those flours to really be intermixed. This cracker, we're gonna roll it out on some silicone baking sheets. So once I get it formed, I'm going to I'm gonna kind of try to square it up a little because we're gonna be cutting it into quarters. So once I get it squared up, I'm gonna put it inside. This is a reusable silicone bag from Liquid, and I'm doing everything I can these days to reduce the amount of saran wrap and single-use plastic that I can, and I love this bag as one of those things that allows me to do that. So I'm gonna close this up and I'm gonna put this in the fridge, and we'll come back and we'll roll it out and bake it off in a little bit. So I'm gonna take it out of its bag. I'm gonna divide this piece into 2 equal parts. And I'm using my dough cutter here. And I'm gonna take 1/2, put it back in the bag and put it back in the fridge because we want this to stay as cold as possible. So with this remaining piece, I'm gonna cut it in half again. And then I'm using these Silpats from Fox Run. Now I use these a lot so that you can see that they're really discolored. They've spent a lot of time in my hot oven. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this quarter and I'm gonna cut it even further. And these will become my 2 little cracker slabs. So what I'm gonna do, again, we're gonna roll these super thin. I think the thinner the better. I'm gonna use a little bit of my white rice flour, one of my favorite little flours, to hit my rolling pin. There's enough olive oil in the dough mixture that you don't really have to grease the Silpat because it doesn't stick, it will release quite nicely. Now with this, you kind of just want to push it until it gets flattened out. The dough may stick to your rolling pin. I find that I just have to kind of work with it carefully till I can get it rolled out. I could use a bigger rolling pin, but I kind of like the little one. So that's what I'm using. Okay, you see how it kind of holds on to it and comes back around? Now I'm gonna put this one, I'm gonna move it up at about halfway up the Silpat so that I don't end up too close to the edge. And the initial, you know, it's cold from being in the fridge, so initially it's a little bit tough to get it to roll out. So just be patient with it. No need to hurry. If you find that you've got dough sticking to your rolling pin, then stop and just touch it with a little bit of rice flour. Sometimes it tends to flake in one direction, and if you discover that it's flaking, then just go the other direction. So once we've got it rolled out, we're gonna take just plain water in a spray bottle, spritz it, and then sprinkle a bit of salt. And how much salt you use is up to your preference. I tend to like my crackers a little salty, so I use a bit more. Okay, so this one is ready. I'm gonna put it on a baking sheet and I'll do the other ones. So I'll set a timer for 6 minutes. I'm gonna bake them at 350. And then after 6 minutes, I open the oven, I pull out both pans. I take the one on the top, I put it on the bottom. I take the one on the bottom, I put it on the top, and I also turn it sideways. So it just helps it to bake more evenly. So that's 6 minutes. So out, turn sideways, put down, turn sideways. Actually, I think this one was supposed to be sideways, but that's good enough. All right, 6 more minutes. And here we go. Delicious sourdough crackers. Let me close the oven. I will take these off and just let them cool a bit, and then we will just kind of chunk them up. So now that our sourdough cracker has cooled to the touch, basically all we're gonna do is break it up. It will have a very rustic crispy, delicious presentation. There's a little bit of a toasted one, my favorite. I'm Rebecca Merola, and I encourage you to check us out at functionjunction.com or stop in the store to say hi.